everyone. I hope you guys had a great week last week. This week we are going to work through lessons 61 through 64. So let's get started. This week you're going to need your lessons manual, the student worksheets, the math card games manual, and the game cards. You will need the dry erase board, or in this geometry section of level C, we're going to call it the drawing board. You will need tape, preferably removable tape. It'll be easier for you to use. You will need the T-square, a sharp pencil, preferably a mechanical pencil. It'll be easier to use a mechanical pencil, and also an eraser. And you will need the 30-60 triangle. Now, the removable tape and the eraser and the mechanical pencil are not included in your Right Start Math materials, so you'll need to get that separate. This week, we are going to continue to working on geometry concepts, as well as start using geometry to introduce fractions. Let's get started by turning to lesson 61. The first paragraph in the warm-up section is a review from lesson 60. If you need to, you can go ahead and review those terms from that lesson, lesson 60. The last part of the warm-up is working on and reviewing mental math problems. Because we're going to be spending significant time working on geometry for the next several weeks, you're definitely going to want to keep a pulse on your child's math fact skills. If you see some start to slip, you're going to want to add some math card games for review. For lesson 61, your child will be learning how to correctly use the T-square. You will first start by having your child tape their paper onto the drawing board. Now, the best tape to use is removable tape because it will reduce the residue left when you remove the tape. The drawing board won't remain sticky and have extra residue on it, but it will also allow you to use the same pieces of tape more than once. You're going to want to have your child learn to tape the paper on the drawing board correctly. So let me demonstrate how to do that.
So I'm going to demonstrate to you how to appropriately tape the worksheet onto the drawing board. Now, as you can see, this piece of paper is not on the drawing board, but I did want to show you these markings. I have used this drawing board for several children so far, and I do not nor always have reusable tape, and so I wanted to show you the residue that is left. Now, if I were to scratch it off, it will eventually come off if I do it carefully, but another reason to go ahead and get reusable tape if you do not have it. Now, before I start, I usually take my pieces of paper or tape and have it ready off to the side so that when I get it ready to tape on, I don't have to worry about finding the tape and then making sure my paper stays in place while I'm pulling the tape apart. So once I get my paper in general position, I'm going to get my T-square out, and I'm going to find some of these horizontal lines that I'm going to use to work my T-square against so that I can get my paper completely as horizontal and straight as possible. And once I get it into a position where I think we're good, I take my pieces of tape and I put it on the corners here. Now, I know the instructions say to not put it on the bottom. However, I have done that, put tape on the bottom as well, normally because my kids don't like this flying up on them. So I will also tape this to the bottom as well. And I will also double check and make sure all of the air bubbles are out as I'm taping the paper on. So now I have this taped on. I want to do one final double check to make sure it didn't slip as I was taping it on, and it looks good to go.
Look at the section called Introducing the Drawing Tools. You're going to want to use the correct names of the tools when you're using the drawing tools. For lesson 61, your child is going to be using the drawing board, which is the whiteboard that you've been using, but they will also be using the T-square, and that's what this is, the T-square. Take a look at the section called Drawing Horizontal Lines at the top of the second page of the lesson. In this section, you're going to let your child line up that T-square to the side of the drawing board. Now notice the placement of the T-square for a right-handed child and a left-handed child. A funny story about that. So my first two kids are left-handed. And so I got in a habit of handing my tools to my kids on their left-hand side for placement on the board. But my next two children are right-handed, and so when they started drawing, I kept giving their materials to their left hand, and they would constantly have to switch it to their other hand. And every single time I gave it to them, they kept asking me, why do you keep giving it to me in my left hand? And it became quite a joke in my home. But that being said, make sure your child uses the drawing tools appropriately, whether they're right-handed or left-handed. The first activity your child will do with the T-square and the drawing board is to draw a horizontal line, or actually numerous horizontal lines on their worksheet. Now, just a reminder, make sure you continue to use the term horizontal to help them learn that term and what it means. Let me demonstrate this portion of the worksheet.
So this worksheet is working on drawing horizontal lines. It's best to work on drawing worksheets if you have a mechanical pencil. If you don't have a mechanical pencil, just make sure that your regular pencil is sharpened. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is make sure that your T-square is flat up against this side. And so you're going to want to hold it in place and then move the T-square to where you're needing to draw it, and then press the pencil lead against the edge of that T-square and just draw your lines. As I draw, I want to make sure that I'm constantly keeping this T-square up tight against the drawing board. And so there you go. Now this next section, you're actually completing 3 rectangles. So they've got the starter lines here. We're just going to go to the top. I'm going to press my pencil to the very top of that, and I'm going to line up my T-square up against it. So my first step is to line my pencil up to the top point, slide my T-square, and then draw my line. And do the same thing down here. And you're going to do that for all of these shapes. I'm only going to do a couple here just to give you an idea of how that works. Now for this particular section of the worksheet, we're supposed to draw the horizontal diagonals. So again, we're going to line up our pencil on the vertex of this shape, and we're just going to hold this T-square as tight as we can and then draw it across. And that's how we're going to do that. We're going to do the same thing here. Line up my pencil, hold my T-square nice and tight. And the reason why I say hold the T-square nice and tight, because we're working on this edge here, and so it's easy for the T-square to go to be moved. So make sure you're holding it really tight where you are drawing. The final portion of this worksheet, you're actually going to be drawing these figures. You're going to divide these figures in half, and we're going to write the 1/2. So they've given you on this circle the actual center point. So we are going to use that circle to draw a line to split that circle in half, and then we're going to mark this as 1/2. And we'll do the same thing with these other shapes as well. Let me show you the triangle because that's a little bit different. We'll start on that point, slide my T-square up, hold it in place, and then draw my line.
Continue down to the next section called Worksheet 30. Here your child is going to read the remaining instructions and complete the rest of the worksheet. Sometimes kids struggle when they read instructions. They don't necessarily retain everything or remember to do everything on the worksheet. If that's the case with your child, you may want to try having them read those instructions out loud to help get that information in their minds. Notice on the worksheet, the last 4 problems, your child is actually going to start working a little bit on fractions, particularly the 1/2. More work will be done later, but this is just sort of an introduction to fractions. The very last paragraph in that section, you're going to use the term congruent. Now, this is a casual introduction to that term congruent. And if you look to the right of that section, it gives the definition. It says congruent means that the figures exactly fit on top of each other, sometimes requiring a rotation or a reflection. After you complete the lesson, if you are using reusable tape, you can have your child leave the tape on their drawing board and then they can reuse it in lesson 62. For the conclusion of this section of the lesson, you're actually going to ask your child what 1/2 plus 1/2 is. If that's a struggle for them, have them look at the worksheets, the shapes actually in the worksheet, and where you can show them 1/2 of a circle and the other half of the circle. So you can kind of help them see that 1/2 plus 1/2 equals a whole or 1. There is not a math card game listed for this lesson, so you're going to want to pick a game to play to keep up your child's math facts. All right, well, let's go ahead and turn to lesson 62. In this lesson, your child is going to learn the term rhombus and equilateral. The first two paragraphs of the warm-up section will review the terms and concepts that were covered in lessons 60 and 61. So you feel free to review those lessons if you need to. The last part of the warm-up section will use a word problem to practice math facts. Be sure that your child uses the part-whole circles when solving this problem. You want to get your child in the habit of using part-whole circles whenever they're working on word problems. It's really going to help them down the road. Take a look at the section called Drawing Vertical Lines. Lesson 61 used horizontal lines. This lesson is going to use vertical lines. So you want to make sure that you use the correct terminology, making sure you're using vertical, horizontal. Later on in the lesson, you'll be talking about a vertex and rhombus, etc. Use those correct terms when teaching. And you may even want to have your child look up these terms in their math dictionary or write out those definitions as they're coming across them to help them in their retention of the information. For this section, your child is going to tape worksheet 31 to their drawing board like they did in the previous lesson. Make sure to have them line up that worksheet just as it was taught in lesson 61. They're going to use the T-squared and the 30-60 triangle. Now, remember to use those terms when referring to those tools. They're going to use those tools to draw the vertical lines on worksheet 31. Let me show you how that will work.
For worksheet 31, you are going to draw vertical lines. Now you're going to do that by first lining up your T-square as normal. But then we're going to use our 30-60 triangle, and we're going to press that up against the top of the T-square. So it can move side to side, but make sure we hold our T-square level. And we're going to draw again, start by putting my pencil on the dot, slide my 30-60 triangle, and notice I have to hold both my T-square and the triangle. Now for some children, this is a little difficult, especially the younger children or ones who have problems with dexterity. So you may want to put your hand in there and help hold the T-square in place while they learn to hold the T-square and the 30-60 triangle. So here I'm drawing these lines. Okay. Now this next section, we are going to actually start drawing both horizontal and vertical lines. So here we're completing the octagon. I'm going to again move my T-square. When we draw horizontal lines, we're just going to need the T-square. So I'm going to move the T-square to where I need it to be to draw my horizontal lines. And then I'm going to get my 30-60 triangle to line up so I can draw my vertical lines. And there you go. You're going to do the same thing for drawing both the horizontal lines, diagonals, in the rhombuses. So here we're going to do our horizontal lines. And make sure, again, we're at the edge of our T-square, so make sure that it's nice and tight up there. And we're going to do our vertical lines using the 30-60 triangle. Oops. Okay. Now the bottom shapes we are going to be drawing, splitting up into 4 equal parts. So we're going to split them using horizontal lines and vertical lines. I'm going to show you what that looks like with our circle. Again, they've given us the center mark for the circle, so we can do our horizontal line based off of that, and then our vertical line based off of that as well. and then I'll write the 1/4 in these segments. And you'll do the same thing for these other shapes as well. Now this one looks a little different, but it's the same idea. Find that center line, or the middle of that shape, and just draw from one side to the other. And the same thing, splitting it in half on this in the vertical way. And there you go. The star over here, your horizontal line is going to fall in between these 2 points here, or vertexes. And the vertical is going to fall between these 2 vertexes. And there you go.
Take a look at the second page of the lesson under the section called Worksheet 31. Here, your child will again read through the instructions and then complete the worksheet. Again, if you want, or if your child needs to, have your child read those instructions out loud. If your child has a habit of struggling with following instructions, you may want to have them not only read the instructions out loud, but also read through them a couple times and then describe to you what they are supposed to do on the worksheet. The last 4 shapes on the worksheet will have your child divide them into 4 different parts. And then they're going to mark the fraction inside those parts. So they're going to put 1/4 in each of those segments. Here we are actually very casually introducing the fraction of 1/4. The last question on the worksheet asks the child if the 4 parts are congruent. Now, if your child does not remember the term congruent, then go ahead and review that term with them, or have them look it up in the dictionary. Now, just for your sake, remember congruent is a shape that is identical to another, but it could be rotated or might need to be rotated or reflected. Basically, you can lay one of those pieces on top of another and they will match up with no overlays. Look under the section called rhombuses. This section starts off by asking your child about parallelograms. Now, parallelograms are shapes that have 4 sides with the opposite sides being parallel to each other. And on this particular worksheet, there are 3 parallelograms. So if you'll take a look here, this here is a parallelogram. You can see that these 2 sides are parallel and these 2 sides are parallel. This one as well is a parallelogram. It has 4 sides, and you can see these sides are parallel and these sides are parallel. And the other parallelogram is right there. Again, 4 sides, parallel and parallel. You will continue to read through that section called rhombuses and tell the child that 3 of those shapes are rhombuses because their sides are equal in length. More specifically, they are called equilateral parallelograms. Now, I think I've mentioned this before, but if you break up the term equilateral, lateral means side, and equa means equal, so equal sides. That will help in their memory of that term. There's also quite a bit of information included in that very last paragraph. Now, sometimes, I don't know, maybe you're not like me, but I get a little tired or lazy towards the end of a lesson and I start kind of zipping through the last part of the lesson. But for this particular lesson, make sure that you hang in there for that lesson, for that paragraph, because there's a lot of really good information that's being taught just in that last paragraph. You don't want your child to miss that information. Take a look at the conclusion section. The last 2 questions are asking your child about the fractions 1/2 and 1/4. Now, if your child does not know the answers to these questions, spend a couple minutes working with them through this concept. Fractions will be covered in greater extent later on, but you want to get their feet wet a little bit on this. So make sure they understand 1/2 and 1/4 and how they relate to one another. There is not a math card game listed for this lesson, so you're going to want to choose a game to keep those math facts fresh. All right, well, let's go ahead and turn to lesson 63. This lesson is going to review the term hexagon. Also, when teaching this lesson, again, I've said this before, but make sure you continue to use the correct terminology as you're talking about shapes, parts of shapes, and the drawing tools. This is going to help your child learn and retain those terms. The first two paragraphs of the warm-up will review material that was covered in lessons 60, 61, and 62. You can go back and review those segments of those lessons if your child does not remember that information. The warm-up section concludes with another word problem. So you're going to want to make sure your child uses the part whole circles when working through that word problem. Take a look at the section called Worksheet 32. Here your child is going to attach, again, the worksheet to the drawing board using the tape. They're going to pull out the T-square, just remind you, this is the T-square, and the 30-60 triangle, which looks like this. So it has the smaller angle and the larger, little bit larger angle. You're going to ask your child what shape is shown on the worksheet. So here's the worksheet, and you're going to ask what shape that is. Now, if your child does not know, there's a helpful hint that's included in the explanation section, and it says this. It's to the right of worksheet 32. To help in remembering that hexagons have 6 sides, think of the words hexagon and 6. They both have the letter X in them. So that might help them remember the name of that shape. Take a look at the section called Drawing Horizontal Diagonals. Again, your child is going to read through those instructions on their own. If they need help with that, go ahead and have them read through those instructions out loud, or have them read through those instructions several different times. During this section, your child is going to, and then even the following section, your child is going to draw horizontal and vertical diagonals in this hexagon. So let me show you what that will look like for this particular activity.
The first thing your child is going to do on worksheet 32 is to draw the horizontal diagonal as well as the vertical diagonals. So let me walk you through that. We're going to draw our horizontal diagonal, which is this direction, using just the T-square. Make sure I'm lining that up really well. I'm holding my T-square really tight and drawing that. The vertical diagonal are going to be this direction, so I'll have 2 of these lines, and I'm going to line up my T-square underneath the paper a little bit, and then line up my 30-60 triangle so that I can draw my vertical There you go.
Take a look at the top of the second page of the lesson under the section called Drawing the 60-Degree Diagonals. Here your child is going to use the 60-degree angle, and here's your drawing and your 30-60 triangle. That would be this particular angle here. So this side. Here your child is going to use the 60-degree angle on your 30-60 triangle to draw a couple of these diagonals. Let me show you what that looks like.
Now your child is going to draw the 60-degree diagonals. So we're going to work off of this edge of the 30-60 triangle. And we're going to basically draw the diagonal from there to there. And make sure we hold our T-square down tight and our 30-60 tight after we get it lined up. And then we're going to flip it around. So we're going to take this and we're just going to flip it. We're going to line it up to the bottom and the top. Again, holding everything still as possible. And there you go.
The next section is called Drawing the 30-Degree Diagonals. And here your child is going to use the 30-degree angle, this angle here, to finish drawing the diagonals on the hexagon. And so let me show you what that is going to look like.
The next segment and the final segment for this worksheet is working on our 30-degree diagonals. So we're going to be working off of this corner. And there are actually 4 of these diagonals we're going to draw. So we're going to start at the bottom here. And we're going to draw our line diagonals from this point to this side point, or our vertex. We'll flip it over like that. We'll do the same thing from this vertex to this vertex. And then we're going to go up and do the same thing from the top, or from these side vertices. And again, flip it over, so like that. And there you go.
Look at the section called Figures in the Hexagon. So once your child has drawn all the diagonals as shown on the worksheet, then they're going to look at the shape and try to find as many various other shapes as possible within those diagonals. So your child is going to find the rectangles, hexagons, equilateral triangles, and other triangles, as well as rhombuses, based on the material, on the shapes that your child has already drawn. So this activity, though, can be a little tricky for children and adults alike. I struggle with this one, actually. Make sure that you take a look at those final hexagon pictures at the bottom of your lesson, because it will show you hints as to where to find those various shapes. Notice also the third shape that's mentioned in this particular lesson. Your child is going to search for equilateral triangles. Now remember, an equilateral triangle is equal sides. Equilateral, equal sides. So that means all three sides of the triangle must be equal in length. The conclusion will review concepts using terminology. The first question is, how many sides does a hexagon have? Also, it will ask how many vertices the hexagon has. Now remember, a vertice or a vertex, which is the singular form of vertice, is basically the point in the shape, or more accurately where two sides of the shape meets. There is not a math card game listed for this lesson, so you definitely want to pick a card game to play that will review the math facts that your child needs to review. All right, well, let's go ahead and turn to lesson 64. This lesson will review the terminology equilateral triangles, and it will officially teach congruent. The warm-up section will review the previous geometry lessons, so feel free to go back and review any of those segments of those lessons that your child needs to review, especially if your child does not remember any of those terms. Look at the section called Reviewing Triangles. Here you are going to draw these shapes as shown under this section in the middle of the first page of the lesson on the whiteboard. Now, if you're like me, I am a terrible drawer. So this is more of an attempt to draw the shapes on the whiteboard. If you'll take a look at the section, though, on to the right of that, it says this: sometimes examples are clearer than a definition. So this is very true. By showing your child what a triangle is and what a triangle isn't will mean a whole lot more than if you were to verbally explain and give a definition. And that is also a very helpful concept to remember in the future when you're teaching your child new ideas. Sometimes it's best to just give them some examples of what something means. Now, I absolutely love the question that's listed in the paragraph underneath those shapes. And it says this: why are the other figures not triangles? This is going to help your child explain to you what a triangle is and what a triangle it is not. And that is a very important process to their learning and solid understanding of a concept. So don't skip it. In fact, you may want to use that kind of idea in other subjects or later on in this level. Below that paragraph, you are going to draw some equilateral triangles. Now, these triangles are going to be a little bit more difficult to draw completely accurately unless you use measuring tools. What I did is I cheated a little bit, and because I'm a terrible drawer, and so I just basically did a triangle as best I could, but then I put measurements on each side of the triangle. Like I would put 6 centimeters, 6 centimeters, 6 centimeters, or 8 inches, 8 inches, 8 inches. That way, my child could see the important aspect of an equilateral triangle, which is that each side is equal to one another. Now, the last paragraph of that page, you're going to ask your child questions and explain to them what equilateral triangles are, and then also give them the definitions. You may want to have your child look these terms up in the math dictionary, or maybe even write them down in their journal to help them remember. The terms that will be covered in this last paragraph is lateral, which means side. Equilateral means equal sides. And then congruent, which means shapes can fit on top of each other. All right, take a look at the top of the second page of the lesson under the section called Worksheet 33. Here you're going to again have your child tape the worksheet onto their drawing board correctly, and then your child is going to draw equilateral triangles and then divide them in half. Now there are several nuances to this activity, so let me demonstrate this activity with you.
So for worksheet 33, your child is going to draw equilateral triangles on each of these lines. Let me show you how that's going to work. Again, we're going to line up our T-square right up on the edge of this drawing board. We're going to use our 30-60 triangle. And we are going to line that up here on this corner. Now, the thing is we do not know how tall this line is going to be. So we're going to draw an extra long line, and we can erase a segment of that later. Then we're going to flip this 30-60 triangle over, and we're going to line it up on that next side. Now see, I did not get that long enough. So now I have to go back. So that's why we want to make sure that we make these lines really long. And any extra I can erase down the road or after I'm done. So let me finish these up because I have another activity to do after this. Okay. And then I can just erase this extra section. So there are my 3 equilateral triangles. Now the next set of directions is going to have you divide each triangle in half in a different way. So what I'm going to do is I know the easiest one is to go straight up and down, right? Do the vertical. So we're going to line up our 30-60 triangle up here at the top, holding our T-square and the 30-60 triangle nice and straight and tight. And there is one of the halves. Now, I'm going to actually use this, and I'm going to flip this sideways. So here's my 30-degree angle sitting on the T-square. So I'm going to line this up to this vertex here and draw my half marking line there. And then I'm going to flip the T-square over so that the 30-degree angle is still sitting on the T-square, but it's on the opposite side. And I'm going to go line that up and draw my half line.
For the section called Problems 2 and 3, your child is going to draw equilateral triangles in the larger equilateral triangle at the bottom of the page of their worksheet. And then they're also going to draw equilateral triangles in the lines provided. So let me show you how that's going to work.
Okay, so for problem 2, your child is going to draw 3 rows of equilateral triangles as shown in this box. Now, when I have my child start drawing this, I want them to evaluate this, see what lines they're going to need to draw. So the first thing I want them to notice is this line is going to go from here all the way up to there. And that's going to work off of this point here. I also see some horizontal lines. And notice that this line starts at the top of this particular equilateral triangle. So we have a couple places that we can start. One thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start on my this line right here. And I'm going to line my 30-60 triangle with the 60-degree angle touching the T-square. And I'm holding both of those pieces nice and tight. I'm going to draw this line all the way up to the top. Now, all I need to do then is draw my horizontal line across, so I know where to start the downward line for the next equilateral triangle, and that's going to line up right here at the top of this equilateral triangle. Now I can draw my downward line. And all I do is line these up, starting at this point here. Let's line up my tools here. And then flip the 30-60 triangle one more time. And by me drawing this line all the way up to the top, I now know this horizontal line, where that's going to go. And then I can draw the remaining line for this equilateral triangle, which, by the way, we could have tacked onto that one as well. And there you go, the equilateral triangles. Now for problem 3, we're going to draw zigzags as shown. So here in this particular one, we are going to use the different angle from our 30-60 triangle. So take a look. If I were to go from here to here, that is not this angle, right? That is, oops, this angle, right? So that's where we're going to start. We're going to work with our 30 angle on this particular activity. So I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to line it up. And then I'm going to flip it over again and line it up. And continue doing that until you've completed this entire segment. Now, for this one, take a look. This does not line up, does it? But if I use, oops, this angle, that lines up. So we're going to line this segment up with our 60-degree angle. And then flip it over. And flip it over again. And there you go. Now, one tip that I forgot to tell you earlier on in the video is removing the paper. One trick is if you, once you tape the paper onto, what I do is I leave a little piece of tape off of the drawing board. So when I'm done, I just pull that off, and that way I can use that tape later on and I set that over to the side, or I'm trying to show you this particular piece of tape here. This one's also off, and so it pulls off nice and easy. So that's a kind of a trick to help you remove the paper and the tape easy without tearing the paper or the tape up.
The conclusion section of this lesson is going to review terms that your child has learned this week. You may want to review other terms that you've covered as well. There is not a math card game listed for this lesson, so you're going to want to make sure that you add a card game for this lesson so that your child is able to keep up on their math facts. Well, that's it for the week. If you have any questions or concerns about a lesson, or if your child is really struggling with something, give us a call or email us. We are here to help. I look forward to seeing you next week as we cover lessons 65 through 68. Have a great week, everybody.